Alright, what I would like everybody to do is go ahead and open up 3ds Max. If this is your first time opening it or one of your first, you're probably going to be greeted with this "What do you want to do?" welcome panel. If you would like, you are more than welcome to go through these already preloaded tutorials within Max that teaches you how to create objects, import and manage objects, etc. I always like doing this when I get a new version, just to learn what's new in 2014 or whatever version you may have. If you are working with anything a little bit older than 2014, that's okay. What we're going to be doing today doesn't have many changes to the overall user interface, so you can still follow along. So I'm just going to go ahead and close out. So right now I'm looking at my perspective viewport. Many of you may see this right away. Others of you may see this this quad viewport. The way that you can toggle between this is going down to the lower right hand corner to a button that's called Maximize Viewport Toggle. So whichever viewport is outlined in yellow, that is called your active viewport, you can maximize and toggle between your quad view and a single view. So if you'd like to go ahead and try that on your computers now, go for it. If you would like to do a shortcut, Alt-W will also achieve that same effect. So what you're looking at up here is the 3ds Max main toolbar. You can use a lot of this to navigate throughout your viewport, create objects, go to your rendering, etc. We'll talk about these more and reference these more in later tutorials. Up here where you see this 3ds Max logo, this is your application menu, kind of like your file menu if you're using Microsoft Word or any of the Office products. So in here you can do save, save as, open, projects, and reset. Reset is a tool that I like to use pretty often when I'm beginning new projects. What reset does is it allows you to erase anything that you've potentially customized in previous projects and just start off with a clean slate. So I'm going to reset because I'm starting a new project and everything goes back to default normal. If you look up here, you also have new scene, open file, save file, undo scene operation, redo scene operation, and project folders. These are just little shortcuts instead of going to the application menu and scrolling down. So it's just a nice thing to keep in mind. So now I'm going to go over to my command panel. So this is the command panel. This is the main toolbar. In the command panel, you are going to do most of your creation with your Create tab. So I have my boxes, my spheres, my torus, all that good stuff. This is the fundamentals of animation. So I'm going to start off by selecting box. So just left click on box. And you click and drag. And I have the base of my box that is being drawn. If you look over to the right panel, you can see the length, width, and height changing with every time I move my mouse. So if I let go of my left click, I see my parameters are 88 by 58 by 0.1, I'm sorry. So as I move it up, the height of my box is changing. So you can see that height bar, those height parameters, increasing and decreasing. So I can left click again and finish my box. Alright. I like to get in the habit of renaming my objects. If I'm working with a large scene that has hundreds of objects, box 1 might be a little obscure if you really want to be working with a cabinet or a shelf or something along those lines. So for this practice, I'm just going to rename it box. I know it already said box, but you can catch my drift. So from here, that was the create panel. I'm going to head over to my modify panel, which is this little quarter blue rainbow. And you see that I have all these parameters just like I did in my create panel when I was actually creating the box. So the nice part is I can go back and I can actually adjust this. So let's say the length is going to be even to 100. That's 1,000. 100. So I can just type that in and press enter. My width is going to be 60, enter, and height is going to be 30, and enter. So you can see that these parameters can easily be changed. You can also click and hold on these toggles, and you can just drag your mouse up and down to increase your length or any parameter you wish. It's a lot easier than just single clicking. It's really not going to get you anywhere, and I'm also not a fan of the clicking noise. So let's go back and type in the 100. So there we have a pretty nice looking box. If you want to go ahead and make any changes to the box, you're going to go to your modifier list. I'm not going to get into this right now, but we have a lot of different options. Some of them may be a little bit more obvious than others, but we'll talk about these in later tutorials as well. So I want to direct your attention up here to these three tools. You're going to be using these quite a bit. You have the select and move, which is just selecting and moving the object. So if I click anywhere outside of the box, my box no longer has a white perimeter around it. That means nothing is selected. So if I click my box, it is selected. You see that it's selected in the modify panel and the create panel. I can work with it. So if I go up here and go to my select and move, I see this XYZ gizmo. This is your transformation gizmo that's going to pop up in several different areas of Max. So I can move my object along the y-axis, along the x-axis, and along the z-axis. This is kind of your first introduction to the 3D space. I'm going to go ahead and go to my 4 viewports so you can see how moving these objects within the viewports is really beneficial to working in a 3D environment. Select and rotate is doing the similar thing. I have my Y rotation here. Just going to rotate along the Y axis. I can rotate along my X axis and along my Z axis as well. So as you notice, if I hover over each one of these axes, it's going to rotate appropriately. I can also go ahead and rotate in between spaces. It gives you a little bit more free-form rotation. So this is up to you if you want to use that or not. Also, going outside of the rotation circle, you still are being locked in between axes. But again, it's giving you a little bit less control. So as you're probably noticing, I keep on pressing the undo button, which is Control Z on your keyboard, or up here you can go to undo scene operation, and that will take you back to whatever state you want to go to. Alright, and finally we have the select and scale. If you hold this down, you have several different options here as far as different kinds of scaling that you want to do. Right now we're just going to go to select and uniform scale, which should be your default. So this one's kind of fun to work with. I want to show you the modify panel really quick, and I want you to pay attention to what happens with the length, width, and height parameters as I adjust my axis. So notice that my y-axis isn't changing. The length of my object is remaining at 100. Okay, so once you start using the select and scale tool, everything in your parameters box is not going to change. They're going to remain feudal. So z-axis is the same thing. If you want to do stretch it between the x and z, you can do that, between x and y. It's all about just hovering over the space that you want to work with. If you want to resize the entire object, just hover in the middle, and you see the x, y, and z triangle turns to yellow, and my whole box can change. Pretty cool. fun to work with. So you're probably wondering, why am I not talking about the length, width, and height segments? I'm just going to get to that later. They make more sense with a little bit more advanced modeling techniques. So stay tuned for that. So we just went over the select and move, the select and rotate, and the select and uniform scale tools. I want to talk about a little bit about undo really quick. Notice that I can keep on undoing, and then as I keep on pressing this button up here, it stops. So the default undo is 20 undos. If you're working with a big project and you're like, oh shoot, I really don't like that, and you haven't saved for a while, which I don't recommend doing, you can change the level of undos. So if you go to Customize and Preferences, you have your preference setting, and under the General tab, which will automatically pop up, you have the Scene Undo with your levels set to 20. If the computer you're working on is powerful, I recommend upping this to 50 or maybe 100, but keep in mind that the higher you go, the slower your computer is going to go. So if you have 100 levels of undo, you should really have more RAM on your computer. RAM is random access memory, which is kind of using all the memory that your computer can currently use. So if you're working with like 2 gigabytes of RAM, I would recommend sticking to a lower level of undo, but 50 is usually good. All right. So now that we have that taken care of, I'm going to go back down here to your camera tools. I already talked about this maximize viewport toggle, which brings you back to your 4 viewports, but these are commands that you're going to be using very frequently, and I want you to understand what the functions are of all of them. So maximize viewport toggle is going back to your 4 viewports, or going to your active viewport, which is highlighted in yellow, and maximizing that, so you can toggle between all of them. Your orbit tool is going to allow you to orbit the entire 3D space. So you're not actually rotating the object anymore, you're rotating the space that it's in. You may have already noticed this compass up here. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this so you can see it. You have a front view, you have your front left view, top view. You can also click and drag all around the object using the compass. Instead of doing it freeform with your orbit tool, it's nice to just click on whatever area of the compass and bring you right back. There's this little icon up here as you hover over the compass that looks like a little house. This brings you back home. So if you're working in a larger space and you're kind of all over the place and you just want to center back in on this object, it brings you back to the default, which is a front, left, top, kind of this isometric view right here. All right. To the left of the orbit tool is the pan view. This brings you back to working in a 2D space. You're just dragging your scene left and right. You can also use pan by clicking on the middle scroll wheel of your mouse and dragging back and forth. I usually use this method instead of going all the way down here to my pan. Just makes life a lot easier. So here we have the field of view. It looks like I'm zooming in and out, but in reality, I'm actually just changing the width of my camera lens. I'm going to recommend that you don't do this right now. It's not very important for your beginning stages of learning Max. So instead, I want you to click and hold on field of view, and you're going to see this magnifying glass with this little box around it. You're going to be using this more instead, and this is just a zoom region. So if I left click and drag out this box, it's going to zoom to that box. So click and hold, zooming right to that region. All right. To get out of that, I'm just toggling my scroll wheel forward and backward. The scroll wheel works with the zoom. Wherever I'm pointing it is the direction that's going to zoom. So if my cursor is right on this corner here, it's going to zoom right to that corner. Kind of a neat little trick. Zoom works the same way. If you just left click, come on, you can zoom in and out. All right, so that's again achieved the same way as your center scroll wheel. Zoom all works well with your 4 viewports. You can zoom in everywhere versus zoom where it's just in the active viewport. Zoom extent selected is if I am way out here in one viewport, way out here, I can go to my active viewport and boom, go right there. But notice that my top viewport up here and my left viewport is still way out here. I want to center all of them. So if I go to my zoom extends all, that's going to bring all 4 of my viewports back to my object. All right, so I know that was a lot. Feel free to go back and kind of practice each one of them. You're going to be using all of these commands at some point throughout your 3ds Max experience, so I recommend getting used to them. So that's all I have for you today on navigating the 3ds Max user interface. Next step is going to be going to the Object Garden tutorial. We're going to be working more with shapes and manipulating the viewports to play around with different shapes and objects and their parameters within the program.